We've been going over the armor of God. I'm reading a book these days. It's called Good Omens. Some of you guys might have seen the show on, I think it's on Amazon. Okay, and maybe some of you guys watched it. In there, and it's about like angels and demons. And in there, there's 3 different demons that come together and they talk about the deed of the day. Okay, so what did they do to help further Satan's kingdom? Okay, so here's 3 of them. The first guy said, I have tempted a priest. As he walked down the street and saw the pretty girl in the sun, I put doubt into his mind. He would have been a saint, but within a decade, we shall have him. Okay, that was guy number 1. Guy number 2, I have corrupted a politician. I let her think a tiny bribe would not hurt. Within a year, we shall have her. Okay, number 3. And number 3, this guy, he's kind of like smart. He wants to use like technology. He doesn't want to do it one by one. He wants to influence the masses. This is what he did. I tied up the phones in central London for 45 minutes at lunchtime. So imagine if your smartphone stopped working for 45 minutes, okay? That's basically what he did. 20,000 people got bloody furious. By the way, the book is written by British people, so that's why. Okay? They went back and took it out on their secretaries and traffic wardens and other people. The pass-along effect were incalculable. Thousands of souls were affected. So question for you guys. How did Satan tempt you this week? Was it through lust? Was it through bribery? Was it through greed? Was it through maybe even a small thing, like getting impatient? Okay. So once again, we are studying a Bible passage that talks all about this. We normally don't think about, oh, Satan is attacking me, or Satan is tempting me. We don't think about that in our society today. But the Bible tells us that we need to watch out. Okay, Satan is always attacking us. So let's go to our verse. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against authorities, against the powers of this dark world, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Okay? So it tells us, okay, not only are we fighting against flesh and blood, we're fighting against spiritual world. There's spiritual warfare going on. Okay? Devil's always scheme is always to get you. Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you have done everything, to stand. Stand firm then, with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, and that's what we went over 2 weeks ago. And last week, with the breastplate of righteousness in place. And now this week, with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. Okay? So people normally say, this is what we call sandals, because most people during that time didn't wear like shoes, but they wore sandals. And so they like to call this equipment sandals of peace. So we went over the belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, and now we're going to go over sandals of truth. Okay. Now, think about you're in a war. Okay, you're in a battle. How important are shoes? Or how about this? Okay, imagine you're fighting in a war or a battle, but you don't have any shoes on. Do you think it matters how powerful you are if you don't have shoes on? Okay, imagine it's all rocks. I was actually thinking about this. Actually, let me show you a picture of what the people wore back then, the Roman people wore back then. Okay, so here's an example. Okay, you could actually buy it on Amazon. Okay, and yesterday we were actually saying that maybe a couple of us, we could bring it back to style. Okay, maybe we could all wear it. Okay, but this is what they wore. Okay, you guys could see that they put nails. They would actually put nails in there and cut the nails. But it's kind of like in our modern day, what do we call these? Cleats, right? We call them cleats. But what do? Right? It gives traction and so different terrains that the people would walk on. And so it would give them stability as well. Okay? And then at the same time, it was supposed to be fitted and then it would actually keep the foot in place and protected, and yet at the same time, it was very quick, it was very agile as well. Okay? So these are the different examples of what shoes actually does for us. There's function involved and there's protection. For us, in modern day, nowadays we do it for fashion as well. Okay? But for them, again, it was very expensive to make these things. Okay? But imagine yourself, okay, fighting without shoes at all. Or war is coming and you don't have your shoes on. You think you're just going to go out? Even if you have the best sword? Even if you have the best helmet? But if you don't have your shoes, then what's going to happen? You're not going to fight very well. You know what I was thinking about? Some of you guys know this when you guys see the picture. But in Korea, they have a whole bunch of these things. Those of you guys who don't have no idea what this is, do you guys know what do you think it is? Okay, so what this is when you go to the parks in Korea, they have a whole bunch of paths, okay, that you're going to see these kind of weird different rocks. Okay? The reason why is you're supposed to take your shoes off and your socks off, and you're supposed to slowly walk on them. And the reason why is so that there's like pressure points on the bottom of your feet. So it's supposed to like massage your feet. Okay? Some of it feels great. And some of it, extremely, extremely painful. Okay? But imagine, okay? 2,000 years ago, they didn't have paved roads like we do, right? So they're not fighting in nice, flat, carpeted ground like we do. So shoes is essential. Can you imagine? Okay? You're the best sword fighter ever, but does it matter? Do you think you'll be able to fight in this kind of terrain without shoes? Without protection? No, you cannot. Okay? So we see that this is a very, very essential piece of equipment. Okay? Even though if both of you guys have shoes on, okay, maybe it won't make too much of a difference, but if you don't have shoes on whatsoever, then again, that's a winning or a losing battle. Okay? So shoes are very, very, very essential item in warfare. There was a person, I forgot the exact reference, but I read it somewhere. There was a person who went on a journey to travel all around the world by foot. So he climbed the highest place, which was what? Mount Everest. And he trained like the deserts everywhere. And he came back and the reporters asked him, what was the most difficult thing in your journey? Okay, what was the most difficult thing in your journey? You know what his answer was? His answer was the tiny little stone that was stuck in my bottom of my feet. Okay? In my shoes. Again, that's how important, again, shoes. Because every time you're walking, again, it affects you. Okay. So once again, do you guys see how important this thing is going to be? Now, it tells us what this is, what this shoes is. It's going to be gospel of peace. Now, this is going to be a dumb question because I already know your answer. How many of you guys want to have more peace in your life? Okay. Every single one of us. None of us, again, we wake up and say, man, I really want some of that anxiety. Ooh, worry. Man, I need, where can I buy some more worry in my life? No, every single one of us, we want to have more peace. Okay? And so a lot of times we come to God and we go, God, give me peace, give me peace, give me peace. And a lot of times we've tried that and we haven't really experienced too much peace in our lives. Okay? But this is telling us, if you actually wear the sandal, then you're going to have more peace. So today we're going to have a better understanding, a biblical understanding of what peace means. Okay? Now, in the Bible, they talk about two types of peace. And this is where a lot of, I think, Christians go wrong. Because they don't understand that there's actually two types of peace in the Bible. The first one, and this is a more important one, but we don't actually seek this a lot of time, but we'll talk about it more. But there's something called peace with God. Okay? Peace with God. And because you have peace with God, then therefore, what we want, what a lot of us want, which is the peace of God. Okay? And I'll explain both of these. But a lot of times, okay, let me tell you now, the reason why a lot of us, including myself, we don't have the peace of God, which is like the peace that we want, like that serenity, that even things are going crazy, there's that inner like equilibrium within you. Okay, that's what all of us want. And yet, we're not getting the peace of God because we're not at peace with God. Okay, so first we're going to go over this. What does it mean to actually have peace with God? Because if we don't have peace with God, we're never going to have peace of God. Okay, so let's talk about this. It's really interesting because the Bible actually says, okay, and I know you guys are going to all think that this is really, really weird, but I'm going to show you Bible verses. But the Bible actually says the reason why we don't have peace with God is because all of us, after sin, have become enemies of God. Okay, so one more time. This is a really weird concept because none of you guys are thinking that you're an enemy of God. But the Bible actually tells us we've lost our peace because we've actually become hostile or we become enemies with God. Now, think of enemies. What do you think of when you're thinking of enemy? You're thinking of somebody who's trying to hurt you, directly. Or someone who's always wishing you bad, bad things will happen to you. And so you guys are thinking, well, I might not be maybe obeying God. I might not be very talking to God very much, but I'm not trying to mess him up. I'm not doing anything directly to him, so I don't think I'm his enemy. So let me show you guys a couple of Bible verses to kind of explain this concept because it's really difficult to understand. So we see this very clearly, and this is how Satan tries to tempt Eve. Okay, and this is what the devil said. And when Eve said, "Oh, I can't eat this fruit," this is what Satan said. "For God knows that when you eat from this tree of good and evil, your eyes will be open, and you will be like God." And this is going to be important. Knowing good and evil. Okay? In essence, this is what Satan, and this is what he tells us all the time too. And this is what he's saying. He's basically saying, listen, the reason why God tells you not to do stuff is because God wants to control your life. Okay? Imagine how wonderful your life would be if you're not a Christian and you could do whatever you want. Some of you guys grew up in the church your whole life, and you go, man, look at your friends who are having so much more fun than you. Okay, look what they're doing with their money. Look what they're doing with their time. Look all their dating and all the different things that they're doing. And look how great it is. But you see, you know the reason why God's telling you not to do that? Is because he wants to oppress you, and he wants to keep you down. Imagine how wonderful life would be if you can become God yourself. You decide what's good or bad for you in your life. So the Bible actually tells us, Adam and Eve, and including every single one of us, we're like, that's exactly what I want. I don't want God to be God. I want to be God. I want to decide what is good or what is not bad for myself. And so we see this struggle all the time, right? You come to the Bible or you read the Bible. You come to church or listen to a sermon, or you read the Bible, and there's things about furthering God's kingdom. There's verses about do this or do not do this. There's verses that tell you, hey, this is the path of righteousness, and this is a path of wickedness. And how do we respond? Do we go, oh God, this is great? No, a lot of times, our first instinct is what? No, I don't want to do it your way, God. I want to do it my way. There's ways that God tells us to spend our money, for example, or give our money. And we go, no. God, hands off. I will decide how I'm going to use my money. I'm going to decide how I'm going to use my time. I'm going to decide how I deal with relationships. Okay? So, every single one of us in here, the Bible tells us, we have this issue within us. That all of us, whether we like it or not, whether we think of it in these terms or not, that we're always trying to be the master of our own lives. And that's the greatest thing in America too, right? This ultimate freedom. I could do whatever I want to do. Okay? But the problem is, when we do that, we become enemies of God. Because we are not self or gods. But when we try to every time become gods ourselves, we are going against God. Okay, again, we don't think of it in those terms. We just think of it as, well, God, you have your own life. Let me just live my life. Let me just do my thing. But every time you are doing that, you are actually saying, no, we don't want God's kingdom. I want my kingdom to flourish in this life. If it's not your will, no, I want my will to happen. Do you guys understand this concept a little bit better? Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple more Bible verses to support this. Okay. In James chapter 4, you adulterous people, don't you know that friendship with the world means enmity against God? Do you see that? Again, we don't think of it like this, right? We don't think like, oh yeah, just because I'm friends with the world, that doesn't mean I hate you, God. I'm just friends with the world. But the Bible actually says, no, the minute you become friends with the world, you are becoming an enemy with God. Okay? So a good concept to understand this is like, okay, imagine like World War II. There was the US and there was the German. Okay? What happens if you become friends with Germany? You automatically become friends of the US. And that's exactly what it's saying. There is no neutral side. Okay? If you don't choose God's side, then you will become God's enemy. Okay? I'll give you another verse. The mind governed by the flesh is hostile to God. Okay, Galatians 5 actually talks about this. So right now we're talking about external battle that we have against Satan, okay? But Paul actually talks about this internal battle that we have also as well after we become Christians. Before, we're enslaved by our flesh, which is our sin. We do what sin tells us to do, and we have no remorse. But after we become Christian, then we have an internal battle going on. And that's why some of us, we struggle. Because we're like, I know I'm not supposed to do this, but I keep doing it. Okay? And he says that part of us that keeps doing the things that we know we shouldn't be doing, that is against God's will, he's saying that's the hostile part of us, within us. That's the enemy within us. Okay, so that's what it's talking about. The mind governed by the flesh is hostile to God. It does not submit to God's law, nor can it do so. Okay? So again, the Bible is very clear. Okay, this is one of the reasons why we don't actually experience real peace that we are all longing for. It's because we don't realize that every time, okay, we're trying to do it our way, every time we try to build our kingdom, every time we are siding with the world, then we're actually at hostile relationship with God. And that's why we're never experiencing peace in our lives. Okay. But we don't think about this. We just go, God, we're good. Can you just give me more peace? But the Bible actually says, no. You first need to stop fighting against God. Okay? So there's another war that you have to fight. There's a war against Satan. That you have to win. There's a war within yourself against the carnal flesh. You have to keep fighting that. But there's a battle that you must lose. And that's a battle that you must lose against God. Again, this is very, very difficult for us because we don't think in these terms. But again, the Bible continues to tell us this is one of the first things that we must do. If we want to experience peace in our lives, we must first stop fighting against God. We need to stop acting like God. We need to start trusting in God. Every time we say, God, I got this. I'm going to do it my way. Then you're basically saying, God, you're not a king. I am the king. Every time you say, God, I know you're telling me to do this, but I think this way is better. Then every time, then you are basically saying, God, you're not worthy enough. You're not trustworthy enough. You're not reliable enough to be God. I know what is better than you. I could be a better God than you. Every time God says, do not fear, but I go, no, this is much bigger. Then we're basically saying, God, you're not that big. You're a very, very small God. I am much bigger than you. So every time we do that, we actually become enemy of God. We're not letting God be God. Instead, we ourselves are trying to be God. And because of that, we never have peace. Because that's not what we're made for. We're not made to be gods. We're made to have a God protect us. And that's what happened to Adam and Eve, right? Is that when they tried to become God, what happened to them? They were naked, and we talked about this last week. They were naked, they were running around, and they were having a blast. But what happens? They said, I want to become God. Then what happens? Shame started to come. Fear started to come. Anxiety started to come. There was no more peace in that peaceful place. And that's exactly what's happening in our lives as well. Do you know that? Do you know that the reason why you don't have peace in your life is because you're trying to be your own gods? That's the primary reason that you don't have peace in your life. That's what the Bible is telling us. So first thing we need to do is we need to surrender to God. The first thing we need to do is to say, God, we need to get off our thrones, take off our crowns, and we need to crown Jesus instead. And say, you are the rightful king. Okay, so that's part one. We need to have peace with God if we want the peace of God. Now, the second thing that we see right away is that when our relationship with God breaks down, our relationship with other people also break down as well. Okay? We're going to skip some of these. The man said, and this is after Adam and Eve, they sinned, and God comes to them. And he says, what's going on? And this is what Adam does. Proud moment for him. The man said, the woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it. Do you see the first words that come out of Adam's mouth after sin? What does he do? He goes, God, it's my fault. I messed up. It's me. What does he do? The first thing he does is throw his wife under the bus. That's the first thing he does. And that's what the Bible is trying to tell us, is that when you don't have peace with God, you're not going to have peace of God. And because of that, that's going to mess up your relationships. When you feel naked, and when you feel insecure, and when you are full of doubt, and when you are full of shame, there's two things that happen to most of us. We either, and just like Adam, we put on our fig leaves, and because of that, we become super, super prideful, or we become super, super depressed. And both of these things, what happens? Both of these things lead to problems within our relationships. Let's go over the first one. Have you guys ever been around people that are always trying to one-up you? So for example, you say, hey, I went on vacation to like Hawaii or something. And they're like, well, I live in Hawaii. Right? They're trying to like one-up you somehow, right? Like the good old form is like long time ago, it's like, my dad does this. It's like, no, my dad could beat your dad up, this kind of thing, okay? So it's this kind of pride. Why? Because we don't have peace with God. We try to cover our nakedness by pushing other people down. Because why? At least that makes me feel better. Look what Adam's doing. He knows he messed up, but what is he doing? He's saying, well, the woman, she did it first, and she gave it to me. It's her fault. But that makes me feel better. It's stupid, but we're doing it all the time. The opposite is just as true. Okay? We try to make ourselves feel better by being in state of pity. Okay? So again, either way, we have relational problems because we don't have the peace of God. And so therefore, every time we're walking around, we're always trying to fight people. Again, not in a like direct way, but we're always trying to compete with people. We're always trying to look up and down at people. And we talked about this with a breastplate of righteousness last week, right? We have all of these deck of cards, and we say, if I only have this, if I'm only better at this than this person, then I feel better. But every time you do that to somebody, there's a break in a relationship. This verse that we're going over, it's in Ephesians chapter 6. But in Ephesians chapter 2, okay, in previous chapters, Paul actually talks about this divide that happens within people. And he says, again, The reason why there's divide between people. Okay, so what happened was the first century Christian problem was racism. It was Jewish versus non-Jewish. Jewish Christians and non-Jewish Christians. And they would always fight. We're the Jews. We're better. Well, we're non-Jews. We're better. I don't know. They keep fighting all the time. Okay? And Paul was trying to say, the reason why you guys are fighting is because you don't have the peace of God. But this is what Paul says in Ephesians chapter 2. He says, for Jesus himself is our peace. Again, he's the one who provides us with this peace. Okay, you got to stop fighting with God. Then you can have that peace. Not just, Jesus, give me peace. That's not going to work. You have to first surrender and deem him as God. Okay, who has made two groups into one and has destroyed the barrier, the dividing walls of hostility, by setting aside in his flesh the law with its commands and regulations. His purpose was to create in himself one new humanity out of the two, thus making peace. Do you guys see that? So because Jesus, we have peace with God, now, therefore, we can have peace with other people as well. Okay? And in one body to reconcile both of them to God through the cross, by which he put to death their hostility. So again, I know it's complicated, but the basic idea is, again, because you don't have peace with God, there's no peace with other people. Because you feel naked all the time, you're always comparing one another. You're saying, oh shoot, I don't feel good. Oh, I'm a Jew, I feel better. Okay? Or, oh, I'm really good looking, I feel better. Or I'm good at this, I feel better. So instead of doing that, if you have the peace of God, then you don't have to compare yourself with one another. You see, there's no divide anymore. Do we have our differences? Absolutely. And yet, it's saying we can become one humanity. How? How do we become united? It's to basically say, we're both sinners. We both messed up. We both try to become gods. When we're not. That's not what we're created for. And yet, we both messed up. And yet, there's Jesus who comes. For both of us. We're both sinners, we're both naked, and Jesus clothed both of us. Now, are you going to say, oh, the clothes that Jesus gave me is better than yours? No, that's stupid. It's not about you anymore. It's about what God has done for you. Do you see that? That's what really unites us. And that's why every time, we go into every group, and we always we have that deck of cards, and we always bring certain card, and we go, this is my identity. Okay? But if we don't come into this church with identity of being a Christian first, we're always going to have division. If we come in and say, I'm Korean first, we're going to have division. If we come in here and say, I'm not a Korean, we're going to have division. You come in here, I'm a Republican, or I'm a Democrat, we're going to have division. But if we all come in here and say, I am a sinner saved by grace, then we're going to have unity. Are we going to have differences? Absolutely. But we're going to have unity. Why? We're all messed up. Okay? It's kind of like an example I thought of was, imagine there's a flood. Okay? Both people, they need to be saved. Okay? But both of them, okay, they're both pointing at each other and say, ha, look, your car is flowing away. My car is still here, so I'm better than you. Imagine how stupid that would be. But that's exactly what we're doing here. Okay? But God is saying, no, Jesus has rowed his boat, and he has come to rescue both of you. Stop pointing at each other. Stop comparing each other. Instead, both of you guys need to realize you're on a common ground. That you're saved by Jesus alone. That you have peace with God. Stop being kings. So if you have the peace with God, again, then you could have peace of God throughout. This week, do I have another slide? Let me see. Okay, no, I don't. This week, Satan's going to attack you in a lot of different ways. Okay, depending on your situation. First, it could be this, peace with God. Again, I think a lot of us are stuck here. Okay? But a lot of you guys, Satan's going to say, no. God doesn't know the best thing in your life, he's just going to oppress you. Okay? Don't do his will. Do your own will. Oh, you got to spend money in your... Oh, come on. You got to spend your time, your precious time. Do whatever you want to do. God's going to mess up your life. So what is Satan going to do? He's going to mess with your peace with God. And he's going to say, do whatever you want to do. Okay? So Satan is going to continue to attack you there. But again, you need to be ready. You need to be ready. You need to know that there's a gospel of peace. Okay? And the second part is that, again, we're always going to be tempted. Satan's always going to have you, okay, compare. And we talked about this last week, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. But he's always going to have you compare yourself with other people and make yourself feel better. And that's going to create division. That's not going to create peace. And again, you're going to say, no. I have peace with God. And so therefore, I'm going to have peace of God as well, wherever I go. I'm clothed with Jesus. Let's end with this. Do you actually understand that if you think of Jesus' life, he didn't have much peace in his life? There was always chaos around him. There was always people coming and demanding stuff from him, wanting to use him. Especially at the end of his life, we see clearly that there's no peace within him. In the Garden of Gethsemane, as he's crying out to God, he says, abort, I don't want to do this anymore. He says, my God, take this cup from me. And as he's doing that, he's in so much anxiety that there's actually blood coming out of his forehead. Is there peace? No peace. When Jesus is on the cross, and he's going through physical agony, and spiritual agony, and emotional agony, he cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me? No peace. No peace. Jesus goes through ultimate disarray, ultimate anxiety, ultimate worry. Why? For you and me. For you and I. So that we can have peace. He is treated as we should be treated, so that we can be treated just as how Jesus should be treated. He takes our punishment, our sins, and he experiences no peace. Why? So that we can now become friends of God, not enemies anymore. We can be united to God once again, and we can experience this peace today. This peace is offered to every single one of us. Again, by which Jesus put to death their hostility. This is offered to every single one of us here. He calls us friends. And he says, I'm a good God. I'm a good king. I want to give you peace. And with this peace, I want you to, every time you walk, you can have peace wherever you go as well.